Yeah. Let's move the mouse just slightly. Thanks. Move that across.
Will you take off my sweater?
Yeah. Okay, so.
Messing up my hair.
No, you can just go back now and do a couple of things. Just do something on paper is fine. If you just read that document, that's great.
People are not supposed to know that I use paper.
That's true. Okay, you just keep working. I'll promise to put them back. That's one change. This one, another change. If you can get up again, please.
That means I can't think.
No, okay.
Good.
You only met her briefly in my parents' place that time.
Yeah. Going. To get my talking to be clear.
Sorry? I have a French friend, David. Yeah, you met David. And he speaks with very, 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 very. And he keeps saying to me, sorry? Sorry? Very annoying. Okay. Okay, that was good. Okay, you ready?
Sure.
Okay, so yeah, just talk to me straight to my face for a minute. I just need to look in the monitor how that looks. Just say hello and stuff.
Oh, hello. It's nice to see you, old Frode.
Oh, I'm old now. That's the first time you ever called me that. It's always been
Well,
the opposite.
compared to when I first met you, isn't that true?
Oh, thanks. That's great. Okay, so why did you decide to have a demo?
Well, in the midst...
Hang on, I was
yes.
stupid. I said I would have a minute of silence. I'm going to do that. 1, 2, 3. Okay, silence. Okay, so why did you decide to have a demo?
Well, it's an interesting question, why I decided to have a demo. We were realizing that it was very hard to tell people what we were doing, and that I then got to thinking about the forthcoming computer conference in the 60s.
Okay, I forgot you. So why did you decide to do the demo?
The idea of putting on the demo, I think, grew on me over some months. But we'd had various degrees of capability we'd programmed into the system we called NLS. And we'd made some movies of what we went on dynamically that seemed suddenly to get to people, how quickly things could be changed on the screen. And so one of those movies prompted enough interest among, promised enough sort of awakening, eye blinking among the other researchers that ARPA was sponsoring at one of their conference meetings where they had with their principal investigators. And it also that we made movies by a large display that we had with a big screen like this and a keyboard and such in front. And so if I got down on my knees and scrunched my head down, I could operate the computer interaction while a camera in the back would be filming the screen. And so we made these movies we would go step by step to describe how you click on a word, how it gets deleted, what you do here, how you can move the whole paragraph by this, etc. And we'd run through that step by step. I had a projector that could go at any variable speed. And then we'd go through that and then say, okay, now look, we'll run it at normal speed. And that just wowed people, how fast you could change things and move them. So that particular presentation, etc., won us a much fatter research project.
Okay, I'm going to ask some specific questions to go back.
Oh yeah.
Okay, because these are really small nuggets that we're trying to get, so I know
Yeah.
exactly what I need. What I would like you to say now is, we had such a problem explaining what we were doing. But
Right.
then we found out when we show videos, people will get it. If you just say that in your way.
We didn't have any videos.
No, I have film, sorry.
Well, in those early days, the things we were doing, it turned out, were quite different from what other people were. And we had very much trouble trying to tell them. So we found out that if we made movies, that we could slow motion through what
Can
we
you do that again, please? Because there was a strange sentence, because it's so crucial. If you just say, in those days we had problems telling people what we're doing.
explaining.
Explaining is better, yes, thank you.
Well, in those days, that we had quite a bit of difficulty explaining what we were trying to do. And other people's picture of interacting with a computer was really quite different. And we found that we had made some 16mm movies that showed the actions we were running through, and that I had a projector that could step through them, and then to showing them step by step what we did. Then we'd go back to the beginning and run it at full speed, and that would just wow them. So in fact, it got us more money from ARPA to build a bigger, better system on a time-sharing environment. And as that was being built, I realized that the computer conference, the next fall computer conference, was going to be in San Francisco. And I wonder if we could put on a presentation. So we got thinking through the logistics of that, and then proposed, and the conference committee thought it over, and it seemed pretty wild what we were trying to do, and they actually sent somebody down to look at what we were doing in the laboratory. So anyway, they finally accepted our proposal that we have a whole 90-minute session at the conference. It took a great deal of preparation, and it never ever could have gotten up and running if we didn't have somebody like Bill English there to do a lot of the hardware setup. And he'd actually been in amateur theater quite a bit as a sort of a stage director. So he got the idea of how to conduct things, and he was also an extremely good engineer. And then the software people headed by Jeff Rollison really came to play too. So to put on that presentation, we had to lease 2 television.
Could you talk about Bob Taylor, actually, how he fit in?
He didn't.
But did he talk to you about the whole thing of if the funders found out, they might consider it, or was that someone else?
I think it was someone else at the time.
Okay.
He's the one that gave me the money.
Bob Taylor gave you the money?
he's the one that at a meeting of the principal investigators, where I showed one of these movies, and it created quite a while. That evening, at sort of the beer break, he walked up to me and said, "You know, Doug, your problem is you don't think big enough." Almost his exact words. He said, "What would you really like to do?" "I'd like to have a time-sharing computer that we could build and use, and just for my group, and we'll do our work on it."
Okay, go back. This is really good. You said at the meeting. Just talk here, because it's really nice when you talk to the camera. Can you explain what meeting that was? So if you say the meeting of blah blah, where Bob Taylor blah blah.
That he was head of a very small office.
Start with his name, so
Okay.
we have it from you. Yeah, sorry.
Bob Taylor sort of got to be the second one in a row heading this small office called Information Processing Techniques Office, IPTO, in ARPA, that was founded earlier by Joe Licklider to start research and processing for the Defense Department. And so Bob had been working for NASA, and I told him about this thing at Lick, and he thought that was great, so he came over and got acquainted, then got hired by Licklider. And when Licklider's term of office was in, well, Bob was then the head of the office. And so it was a practice all the time anyway, so that office had maybe 6 or 8 research projects with principal investigators each, that they would periodically, perhaps twice a year, get them all together and have a day or so of interaction about who's doing what and how it can be improved. So I had brought one of my movies things for this one conference, and it turns out no one else was all ready to say what they were doing, so I said I had a movie, and so I showed it. And you show it by running step by step through, showing here's the text, here if you want to, you move the cursor over, and here's how you move the cursor, and then you can click on the word, and then bingo, you can have it disappear, or you can move it someplace, just bing, bing, etc. And so you actually reframe some paragraphs step by step, then you go back to the beginning, and you run it real time. And it hit everybody I showed any place, just abruptly, that whenever they've been thinking about interactive computing, they'd never thought about just how quickly and flexibly you could do things. So this impressed that group, which was handy, because at the end of that meeting, Bob said, "Well, Doug, you know, your problem is you don't think big enough." And that really set me back. He said, "Well, what would you really like?" And so I poured it out that I'd like a full-time sharing computer dedicated to my lab, and we would keep improving our system and doing more and more and more of all of our work on it. And, oh, all right. So that's what got moved in. So while that came in then in the springtime, we were getting it up.
What year did you have that meeting?
67 probably. Late fall.
Was that the first funding from Bob?
No, I've been having, the things I showed were funded by them also.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to just do this so I can see later. It's a different section. Can you talk about the actual, how much effort went into producing the demo, and just how much work it was and stuff like that?
Well, to produce that demo, if we just assume here are all the tools we were building anyway as part of the research project, but we had to find a video projector. And boy, that was really a kick. It stood about 6 feet high and 3 feet by 2 feet, and a very novel phenomena by which it did its job, but it could put a 20-foot picture up on a screen that people in the whole auditorium could see. And so we borrowed I think, borrowed that from NASA. And then we had to get the video up there because all of our displays were generated on little screens like this with a video camera picking it up and piping it out to video viewers in our lab. Well, that was handy because the telephone system could lease for us set up and lease 2 video lines from our buildings in Menlo Park at Stanford Research Institute with a relay up in the hills and another link down to the hotel where the conference was going to be, the conference center, on the roof, and then we'd run it down. So it took quite a bit of work to get all that running, so we had these 2 lines coming up. And Bill English built a platform that sat in the audience section, fairly back from it, right in the middle. And he had canvas around it, so he could sit in there watching the stage and controlling what went to the projector, and he had the feeds from both videos coming up there. And so that we had to get my actions at the keyboard and the mouse. They went into a homemade modem that piped it down to SRI and to run the time-sharing computer. And then the video would get piped up and he'd show it. So I could be actually interacting with that machine that was 35 miles away probably. And then we had a second one too. And so I made the scenarios by hand, you know, what I would do with going through the different stages, and had that all worked out. But part of we had was that, so with the 2 cameras, we had borrowed people that could work and borrowed video cameras too. So some that they would be able to shoot the people there and pipe up people and or computer screens up according to the script that was going. And Bill English sat there and was on the voice line that we had back and forth, you know, getting everybody ready. It's your turn, Bob, you better get ready for this, and so on. And okay, we're switching over. And I sat up there, and they put the earphones on for me to hear what all was going on. And it just sometimes got really distracting because it was, people says, oh, I can't get ready. Hey, I'll never make it. And that was going on in my ear while I was supposed to be wrapping up some other part for that.
Do you remember the first sentence you said in that presentation?
The first sentence I said in that presentation, if it all goes well, I hope, or something.
You also said, what would be like if you're in your office?
Oh, that's right.
Can you say that?
I think what I asked them, just to start off, is saying, can you imagine what it would be like if in your office you had a computer screen and the keyboard and such, and access to an interactive computer that was available all day, and there I switched some words or something, got it mixed up, as I do, and I gave a smirk because I was so proud of it. You know, how will you make use of it? So that was a big part of how we went ahead to try to show them how we make use of it.
Just start again, so you say it to the camera, whatever it is.
Where I petitioned for this.
Sorry, please start with, I remember the conference call.
Yes. Well, one incident was I had to petition to the whole conference committee, and it was a very special request to use a whole session for something like this. And it sounded so, well, probably it sounded them off the wall. They just said it sounded very special. So they had one of the committee members had to come down and look over all the things we were doing in the lab just to kind of get a feeling for, you know, how real were we and what could we do. That was, it was fun, and nobody was nervous at all. Boy, because it was just kind of a miracle that nothing crashed.
It did crash. Jeff Rulofson told the story that he was so nervous that it would crash, that he wrote a routine that if it crashed, it would automatically start up immediately with the data on screen that was there when it crashed.
Uh-huh.
So if you go through frame by frame, he says, there's one frame where the system is down.
Oh, really?
Can't tell that today.
He never told me, at least I don't remember it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, I'll do one of these, Joe. Right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yes.
Well, there are many, many things shown in that presentation that I wish people would go through and just sort of tabulate to say how many of those are things that fit into today's general pattern of work. And I think there'd be quite a few that you'd have trouble doing.
For example,
the different viewing and the flexible jumping inside the documents. Because you say jump to link and click, the system will go searching downstream on that text to find a link. So some of the views you could say, I only want to see 2 or 3 lines of a paragraph in there. So you could fix it so you're looking at 3 lines and the carriage returns have put the link underneath it. So could just jump on the bottom line, say jump link, click on the bottom line. So that's the way I can move around between a lot of the views. And so I think we sort of showed people what links were like in different cases, used them. And there's one in which I just had a graphic thing that I just evolved through to show them the kind of ways conceptually that this sort of provided knowledge for people. And no one's ever asked me about all that, and I would really like to find an opportunity to tag all those things and outline the kind of capabilities that were represented.
do you have that on a piece of paper, or is it all in your head? Do you want to do that now? That's one of the things we need.
I'd have to go through the thing.
Okay, we'll do that in the next session then. Because one of the things we will be asking you about is, first, we'll be asking you to describe the general epiphany of computer interaction. Exactly what you thought then. That will be separate from what you actually built NLS to do. We'll have those as 2 separate
Or
sections.
built to do, and then what of that was demonstrated there.
Oh.
Because you just demonstrated sort of a subset.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, I haven't looked at it for so long.
Oh, let's look at it together then, and then you can comment on it. That'd be really worthwhile. Are there any, I would like to have some more stuff about the time between when you were hired at SRI and the time when you decided to do a demo. Basically some stories about how hard it was to get the work done.
Well, that was 11 years after I was hired. So, and 17 years after I committed myself to that this is what my whole career was going to be aimed at. So all those years were preparing and trying to get a chance to get the research going. And then stumbling with it. And
so did people at SRI immediately understand what you wanted to do and support you?
Well, when I'd had 3 interesting experiences early in 1977 that I'd finished my PhD at Berkeley.
77?
57,
Yeah.
Thank you, in 1957.
Zoom in on you for this, just pause for a second, please. Right, let's continue.
So I'd had a succession of 3 interesting experiences.
Hang on, I'm sorry. We may be cropping a little bit when you move your head. Your eyes got too high, so please start. Yeah, okay.
Well, in the spring of 19 1957, I had a succession of 3 experiences that sobered me immensely and brought me some realism. You know, I had, since 1951, had this dream about using computers interactively and making huge inroads on how well we could understand complex problems by working that way. So one of these came at Berkeley early in the spring, that I'd gotten my PhD and I was teaching and assumed I would be a teacher and get the research going. And but some older professor one Saturday at a barbecue, in a friendly way, asked me what I was interested in doing. So I told him, boy, no one had been interested. And he frowned a while, and then he said, he asked me if I knew how promotion was handled in universities. And unbelievably, I'm just such a naive country boy that I hadn't gotten that figured out. So he explained it about peer reviews, passing or not passing the papers you write to get into good enough journals. So if you can't get enough good papers and good journals, you're not very likely to get promoted. And he says, I can tell you now, if you keep talking like you are, you'll be this low-level acting assistant professor forever. And suddenly I believed him. So I just decided, okay, I guess I better leave the university. And so the next, the only Silicon Valley-like outfit in this area was Hewlett-Packard, which had gotten its start during World War II. And since I'd been trained in the Navy as an electronic technician, and some of that time on Treasure Island, where they had the Navy base for training, and I knew about Hewlett-Packard, and we used their equipment. And so, well, maybe they. So I rang them up and went down, interviewed, and because of the novel things I'd done in my PhD research and the patents that accrued from that, well, apparently they just thought, oh, good, they gave me a job offer right away. And then I came to this question of saying, well, I'm assuming you're going to get into computers because I'm committed to a career working with computers. And the head of research said, oh, gee, Doug, sorry, not a chance. So that threw that out. And just for the hell of it, I tried Stanford. And the dean of engineering wrote me back a nice letter saying, well, we appreciate your interest, but since we're a very small university, we have to specialize in highly academic research things. And since computers are only a service activity, we don't contemplate ever having courses in their design or use. And so by the time I got to SRI and was cautioned, hey, just tell them about your research and your patents. Don't tell them about all this. I'd learned by then. And so I got hired. So I really learned that it sounded, in the paradigms of those years, it just was as outlandish to be talking about interactive computing as it would be today to be saying, hey, you know, and pretty soon everybody's going to be able to have a personal helicopter. We have to get ready for that. It was that outlandish.
But everybody understands what you're trying to do now, right, Doug?
You want me to talk?
Yeah.
Well, one could ask, how much has that changed over the, let's see, 50, that's going on 50 years. What I finally learned, and there were even more pain, you know, 20 years later it all collapsed totally. And so it could make a person feel horribly, oh, if they don't understand me, I'm just such a martyr, da-da-da. But by then, I'd learned what the word paradigm meant, and had really come to see that the paradigms that exist in our society.
Wait, by then when? When did you learn about how important paradigms were?
Well, things just got from bad to worse in the 70s. Things peaked like that period in the late 60s, and then they started.
Hang on. Okay, where are we now? We are at the point where, this is what I'd like you to say in the beginning to lead to your paradigm point. It was hard to get my ideas across in the 50s. I had some success leading up to the demo, but things got even harder in the 70s, something like that, to mix those two periods. Okay. And then you explain, you're finding out paradigm and explaining what it means.
Well, something about me or my ideas or motives have kept me for years feeling frustrated, and that people weren't understanding what I was saying, or if they did understand them, they would feel like it's so outlandish that they'd have a hard time believing that any sane young man or sane old man would be adhering to them. And really, it really made it very hard to approach people when I was first at SRI, or for that matter, for decades, to write proposals for what one would want to do. And there were some very, very sort of rough experiences I was given some of those years that were very discouraging. But I began to understand more and more about the paradigm, the term paradigm and what it literally meant. And it really is how people sort of unconsciously have assumptions in their mind about what's feasible or likely or something. It's something about the vision about the terrain down here in the future. And we all get that, and I think it's a very interesting socio-cultural phenomena about what establishes paradigms in a culture and what moves them at time. And I've begun to realize more and more that, for instance, as the technology that we've emergent changes things ever more rapidly, well, people's paradigms about what that can bring to their society and how we can adapt our culture and our practices and our businesses, etc., to integrate with that and harness it, those perceptions that you call paradigms just don't evolve fast. And there's a real danger that if other things are accelerating and our paradigms are like how far ahead we can see, and if we don't extend that vision, we'll be traveling so rapidly over such rough kinds of terrain that we're just very likely to collapse. Applying the ultra-modern stuff to in old patterns of implementation and activity and integration. So that the more I realized that, beginning in the 60s and really in the 70s, etc., it kept me from just feeling just washed out, totally depressed. And so anyway, a lot of it is just saying, well, hopefully society will get to realize that. And then I wish I were a better marketeer or better oriented. That I wish I'd written about 5 books trying to outline what I've been seeing and learning by that. But I've got these defects of I don't quite get it what it would take, and I didn't understand marketing and many things. But I'm still hopeful, and paradigms are changing, and quite a few of the things that have been so dominant in my perception about what the potential is, about how much people can change the way they think and work, and some of the basic skills that they can get so that they can take advantage of what the computer can do. And it's things like, how much longer do you think books are going to stay prevalent as our way of handing about knowledge? Boy, I made a huge blunder, and I was invited to address the research librarians of the United States at their annual conference, and standing there telling them about the computers and things they were going to do. And the naive country boy then said, and what you need to realize is that books are going to become obsolete, and the computer stuff is going to carry all your knowledge because it's so much more flexible to store, to handle, to vary, to show people. But I wasn't getting very far after I said they're going to become obsolete before the room chill was just down so low, and even this naive country kid could tell that he'd really done himself in. There was no use talking to that audience anymore. But that's the kind of a downstream thing. And another funny thing about paradigms is that the way people use computers is still so much like, hey, they can get it to open a page, or I can scroll down through the pages, or now I can jump to another book. But you say, look, that's still hooked with a lot of what the printing press provided you with. Why can't I have a reference link that points to a particular word or a particular paragraph in any given document? Or when it gets there, actually highlights this particular sentence and shows me the first line of the next 5 paragraphs, just as a view that helps me get the idea of what they have. So those are the things we started working with. And moving around, scrolling, geez, why can't you jump by just saying where you want to go? And people say, well, that got too complicated the way you had it in your system. And you'll say to them, well, let's see. You say you have a 6-year-old daughter? Yeah. Do you think you could say, would you do Daddy a favor and go get my hairbrush? Well, where is it, Daddy? Well, go up to the bathroom, and the second drawer to the right of the sink, if you pull it out, you'll see my hairbrush. Okay, Daddy. Boom, 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 boom. Well, you can do exactly that same thing with all sorts of pinpoints and stuff to tell a computer where to go to get something you'd like to copy here or move, or where you'd like this particular thing to get moved to. And so we were employing a lot of that. So, well, it's still not what they're, still the old paradigm that you have to look at it and point to it, to drag something over and drop it right on the object. And there are many paradigms that in the future people will watch. If any record of what we're doing now, this thing, they'll all think that it's the equivalent of pidgin English, that you don't have a full flexible vocabulary. You say, oof, in order to have things done for you.
We have to change tape. That was very good. The next thing